My name is Brooklyn. I'm 29 years old, and last month I was cut from my own sister's wedding guest list without any warning. After years of supporting Orabella through everything, one cold text message erased me from her perfect day. Instead of begging to be included, I made a decision that shocked everyone. While they prepared for the big ceremony, I boarded a plane to Thailand with my phone turned off. By nightfall, their dream wedding had collapsed into complete chaos, and my family's desperate calls flooded my voicemail. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Revenge Girls. Growing up, Orabella and I had a complicated relationship with a 5-year age gap between us. I was 13 and she was 8 when our parents decided to end their 18-year marriage. The divorce wasn't just the end of their relationship. It was the beginning of my role as a second parent in our household. Mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, which meant I became responsible for much of Orabella's daily care. "Brooklyn, make sure Orabella finishes her homework," Mom would say as she rushed out the door for her evening shift at the restaurant. "And don't forget, she needs her lunch packed for tomorrow." While other teenagers were going to basketball games and school parties, I was helping Orabella with reading assignments and making sure she ate a proper dinner. I didn't resent it at first. Orabella was a sweet kid with curly hair and a bright smile that could melt your heart. She would leave little thank you notes on my pillow, drawings of the 2 of us holding hands with "best sister ever" written across the top. Things changed as we got older. The appreciation faded, replaced by expectations. By the time I was 18, I had been accepted to several colleges, including one offering a partial scholarship for marketing, my passion. But it was 4 hours away, and Mom couldn't manage without me. "We need you here, Brooklyn," she said, her voice filled with guilt but firm nonetheless. "Just go to community college for now. Maybe in a couple years when Orabella's older." Those couple years never came. Instead, I watched my high school friends post about college life and spring break trips, while I worked part-time at a local marketing firm and took night classes. Meanwhile, Orabella blossomed into a popular student, her calendar full of sleepovers and after-school activities that Mom somehow always managed to drive her to despite her supposedly overwhelming schedule. The pattern of favoritism wasn't subtle. On my 21st birthday, Mom forgot to buy a cake because Orabella had a school play the same day. When I graduated with my associate's degree, the celebration dinner was cut short because Orabella wasn't feeling well. Dad wasn't much better after the divorce. His guilt showed in expensive gifts for Orabella, while I received practical items like gas cards and grocery store gift certificates. "You're so responsible, Brooklyn," he'd say, as if it were a compliment rather than an acknowledgement that he saw me as an adult who didn't need his attention. By the time I finally moved into my own apartment at 24, the dynamic was set in stone. I was the reliable one, the fixer, the emotional support. Orabella was the one who needed protecting, whose feelings and desires took priority. That's why when Christian entered the picture 2 years ago, I should have recognized the warning signs immediately. Christian met him at a friend's graduation party, and within weeks, he was all she talked about. Christian was 33, worked in real estate, and had the kind of smooth charm that immediately put me on edge. "He's taking me to this exclusive restaurant tonight," Orabella gushed during one of our weekly coffee dates. "The waiting list is months long, but he knows the manager." Little inconsistencies appeared in his stories. He claimed to be a senior real estate agent, but I never saw him take work calls or show properties on weekends. He mentioned the downtown office, but when I suggested meeting him for lunch one day, he quickly changed the subject. Most concerning was how he suddenly isolated Orabella from her friends and family. "Christian thinks it's better if we save for our future instead of going out with your friends so much." The changes in Orabella were gradual but unmistakable. Her colorful wardrobe was replaced with neutral tones that Christian preferred. She stopped posting on social media without his approval. Her once bubbly personality became quiet in his presence, her eyes constantly looking to him for validation before she spoke. I tried raising my concerns with our parents, but they were charmed by Christian's surface-level politeness and apparent financial success. "He's such a gentleman," Mom said after meeting him, "and he's got such a good head on his shoulders. Arabella needs someone like that." Dad was equally impressed. "The guy knows his sports and investments. He's going places, that one." The red flags continued to wave. 6 months into their relationship, I spotted Christian at a coffee shop with another woman, their body language unmistakably intimate. When I mentioned it to Arabella, she immediately accused me of trying to sabotage her happiness. "He already told me about her. She's a client," she snapped. "Why are you always so suspicious of anyone who makes me happy?" Around the same time, Arabella began borrowing money from our parents with vague explanations about temporary cash flow issues that never quite added up. When I suggested she might want to be more careful with her finances, she accused me of jealousy. The final warning came when I overheard Christian on the phone in our parents' backyard during a family barbecue, his voice low but intense. "Just transfer the funds like I told you. They won't notice until after everything's finalized." When I tried one last time to voice my concerns to our parents, Christian somehow got to them first. By the time I arrived for Sunday dinner, they were already prepared to dismiss me. "Christian mentioned you might say something like this," Mom said, her expression disappointed. "He thinks you're jealous of Arabella's happiness. I thought you were past that childhood rivalry." Dad was more direct. "Not everyone can find a successful partner like Christian. Maybe focus on your own dating life instead of interfering with your sisters." It was the ultimate betrayal, yet somehow not surprising. The foundation had been laid years ago, and now the pattern was simply continuing with a new player in the mix. What I didn't realize then was how spectacularly it would all unravel. When Christian proposed to Arabella after just 20 months of dating, I put aside my reservations and embraced my assigned role as supportive sister and enthusiastic maid of honor. Despite my misgivings about Christian, I was determined to make this special for Arabella. The initial planning phase was actually fun. Arabella and I spent weekends creating mood boards, visiting venues, and laughing over ridiculous wedding traditions. For a brief period, it felt like we were reconnecting, like the sisters we used to be before life and family dynamics drove a wedge between us. "I want a summer wedding," Arabella declared as we flipped through bridal magazines in my apartment. "Something elegant, but not too formal, you know?" I threw myself into research, comparing vendors and creating spreadsheets to help Arabella maximize her budget. I spent countless lunch breaks calling venues and negotiating with caterers. Every weekend for a month, I drove Arabella to different locations until we found the perfect garden setting at Rosewood Manor. "What would I do without you, Brooklyn?" she said, hugging me after we put down the deposit. The words warmed something in me that had been cold for a long time. We went dress shopping together, and I held back tears watching Arabella twirl in a delicate silk gown that transformed her from my little sister into a radiant bride-to-be. Even Mom was emotional, squeezing my hand as Arabella said yes to the dress. "You girls, my beautiful girls." That golden period lasted exactly 4 weeks and 2 days. The shift began when Arabella introduced me to Leah, supposedly an old college friend who had experience in event planning. Leah was tall, blonde, and had a confidence that bordered on arrogance. From the moment she joined our planning sessions, the dynamic changed. "That's a sweet idea, Brooklyn," she would say with a thin smile. "But professionally speaking, it's a bit outdated. Let me show you what's trending now." Somehow Leah was suddenly present at every meeting, every decision. More disturbing was how Christian appeared alongside her, despite having shown zero interest in wedding details before. The two of them formed a united front, with Orabella increasingly deferring to their judgment. Leah thinks we should go with the more expensive photographer, Orabella told me, ignoring the careful budget I'd created. Christian says not to worry about the money. I might have written it off as wedding excitement clouding her judgment, except for the looks I caught passing between Christian and Leah when they thought no one was watching. A private smile here, a lingering touch there. Nothing I could definitively call inappropriate, but enough to set off alarm bells.
The exclusion began subtly. A cake tasting scheduled when I had an unmovable work commitment. A meeting with the florist rescheduled without informing me. Texts about important decisions arriving after they'd already been made. "Oh, didn't Leah tell you?" became Orabella's frequent response. I thought she was keeping everyone in the loop. Then came the bachelorette party, a weekend getaway I knew nothing about until I saw the photos on Instagram. 7 women, including Leah as the apparent organizer, celebrating at a spa resort I had actually suggested months earlier. When I confronted Orabella, her explanation was weak at best. "It was last minute, and I knew you had that big client presentation. Leah offered to handle everything." The final blow came during what should have been a routine meeting with the wedding coordinator. As we reviewed the ceremony order, the coordinator looked at her notes with confusion. "So, Leah will be your maid of honor, and Brooklyn is a bridesmaid, correct?" The silence that followed was deafening. Orabella couldn't meet my eyes, and Leah had the nerve to pat my arm sympathetically. "We thought it made more sense this way," Leah explained when Orabella remained silent. "Since I'm handling most of the coordination already." I maintained my composure, somehow excusing myself to use the restroom where I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed tired, defeated somehow. I'd spend my life being the responsible one, the supportive one, the one who put everyone else first, and this was my reward? That evening, I overheard a conversation that confirmed my worst suspicions. I had forgotten my purse at Orabella's apartment and returned to retrieve it. The door was unlocked, and I heard Christian and Leah in the kitchen speaking in hushed tones. "The accounts are ready," Christian was saying. "Once we're married, the transfers will be clean and untraceable." "What about the sister?" Leah asked. "She's getting suspicious." Christian's laugh was cold. "Brooklyn? Don't worry about her. By the time she figures anything out, we'll be long gone. Besides, Orabella barely listens to her anymore." I froze, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about wedding planning or petty jealousies. Something much more sinister was happening. I waited until they moved to another room before silently retrieving my purse and leaving. That night, I did something I should have done months ago. I researched Christian. Past the surface-level social media profiles and professional headshots was a history of small claims court cases, a bankruptcy filing from 4 years ago, and, most alarmingly, a news article about real estate fraud allegations that were ultimately dropped when the primary witness decided not to pursue charges. Armed with this information, I made one final attempt to warn my sister. I invited her to lunch, carefully prepared my evidence, and gently tried to open her eyes. "I'm worried about you, Orabella," I began. "There are some things about Christian that don't add up." I never got to show her my findings. She cut me off immediately, her face flushing with anger. "I know what this is about," she hissed. "You can't stand that I'm happy. You've always been jealous because everyone loves me more easily than they love you." The cruelty of her words stunned me into silence. She continued, her voice rising. "Christian warned me you'd try something like this before the wedding. He said you can't stand not being the center of attention." "Orabella, that's not true," I finally managed. "I'm worried because I love you." "If you loved me, you'd be happy for me," she snapped, gathering her purse. "I don't want to hear another word against Christian. In fact, I don't want to hear anything from you until you can be supportive." She left me sitting alone at the restaurant, the file of evidence untouched on the table. Later that evening, both our parents called to express their disappointment in my attempt to sabotage Arabella's happiness. "We raised you better than this," Mom said, her voice tight with disapproval. Dad was equally cutting. "Christian told me you might pull something like this. Can't you just let your sister have her moment?" It was clear that Christian had preemptively poisoned the well, painting me as the jealous, controlling sister trying to ruin Arabella's perfect love story. What wasn't clear was how dramatically the real story would unfold, or how sweet silence could taste when the truth finally emerged.
The message came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before the wedding. I was getting ready for work, my bridesmaid's dress hanging on my closet door as a reminder that I needed to schedule the final fitting. My phone buzzed with a text from Arabella, and I opened it, expecting details about the rehearsal dinner. What I read instead stopped me cold. After careful consideration, we've decided to streamline our guest list to reduce costs and avoid potential conflicts. I regret to inform you that we won't be able to include you in our special day after all. Please return the bridesmaid dress to Leah, as she'll be coordinating returns. I hope you understand. This is what's best for everyone. I read the message 3 times, convinced it must be some kind of terrible joke. The formal language, so unlike Arabella's usual texting style, felt like an additional slap in the face. This wasn't my sister speaking. These were someone else's words coming through her phone. My hands shaking, I called her immediately. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again with the same result. Finally, I called our mother, my voice breaking as I asked her if she knew about this. "Oh, Brooklyn," Mom sighed, confirming my worst fears. "Arabella and Christian feel it's for the best. There's been so much tension, and they want their day to be perfect." "Tension?" I echoed in disbelief. "Mom, I'm her sister, her only sister." "I know, sweetie, but these things get complicated. Wedding planning is stressful." Her tone was placating, as if she were talking to a child throwing a tantrum. "Maybe if you'd been more supportive of her relationship with Christian." The implication hung in the air between us. Somehow this was my fault. My legitimate concerns about Christian's character had been twisted into jealousy and sabotage. "Does Dad know about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom hesitated. "Yes, he does. He doesn't agree with the decision, but he doesn't want to interfere. It's Arabella's day, after all." That phrase, Arabella's day, had become the shield behind which all manner of hurts and exclusions could be justified. I ended the call with my mother, promising myself I wouldn't cry until I was off the phone. That promise lasted approximately 5 seconds. As I sat on my bed, mascara streaming down my face, I opened Instagram almost automatically. The algorithm, cruel in its efficiency, immediately showed me a post from 12 hours earlier. Arabella, Leah, and 3 other women at a final dress-fitting celebration. Leah was tagged as maid of honor, wearing a dress that looked suspiciously like the one that had been designed for me, but in a different color. The caption read, "Final preparations with my real wedding family. 18 days until I'm Mrs. White. #blessed, #bridal squad." As I scrolled through the comments, another betrayal revealed itself. Sarah, one of the bridesmaids I'd actually introduced to Arabella, had written, "So glad Brooklyn voluntarily stepped back so you could have a stress-free day. That's what sisters are for." Voluntarily stepped back? My head spun with the realization that Arabella was actively lying about what had happened, painting herself as the reasonable one and me as the magnanimous sister making a sacrifice for her happiness. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah herself. "Hey girl, so sorry to hear you dropped out of the wedding party. Orabella said you felt it would be too stressful with everything going on in your life. We'll miss you there." I didn't respond. Instead, I called in sick to work, something I'd done maybe twice in 6 years, and spent the morning in a haze of betrayal and disbelief. Around noon, a terrible suspicion led me to check my parents' tablet, which I'd helped set up and was still logged into my mother's Apple account. There, I found a family group chat I wasn't part of. Scrolling back several days, I saw the conversation that had sealed my fate. Christian: "I think we need to consider removing Brooklyn from the wedding party and guest list. She's been trying to control everything and creates negative energy whenever she's around. I'm worried about how that will affect Orabella on our special day." Mom: "That seems extreme. She is family after all." Christian: "I understand, Susan, but I've seen how upset Orabella gets after every interaction with Brooklyn. The constant criticism and questioning is taking a toll on her. As her mother, I know you want what's best for her mental health." You're right. Orabella has seemed stressed lately. What does she think about this? She's afraid to hurt Brooklyn's feelings, but she admitted she'd feel more relaxed if she didn't have to worry about Brooklyn's judgment on the big day. Dad: "Shouldn't we at least talk to Brooklyn first? Give her a chance to understand how her behavior is affecting her sister." Christian: "Robert, with all due respect, confrontation will only make things worse. A clean break for the wedding period would be healthier for everyone. We can work on repairing the relationship after the honeymoon." Mom: "I think Christian is right. Orabella deserves to have her perfect day without walking on eggshells." The conversation continued with logistics. Who would use the hotel room and plane ticket already booked in my name? Who would handle my duties? How they would explain my absence to extended family? Not once did anyone strongly advocate for me or question the fundamental wrongness of excluding an immediate family member from such an important event. The final message from Christian sealed it. "I'll help Orabella draft a message to Brooklyn. It's better to do this now than have tension building as we get closer to the date." I set down the tablet, a strange calm replacing the storm of emotions. For nearly 30 years, I had been the family fixer, the responsible one, the one who sacrificed her needs for others. And in my time of need, not one person in my family had truly stood up for me. It was in that moment of clarity that something shifted inside me. A lifetime of putting others first crystallized into a single powerful realization. It was finally time to put myself first. The wedding was 3 weeks away. The bridesmaid's dress I'd paid for hung unworn in my closet. The non-refundable plane ticket to the destination and the hotel room deposit represented nearly $1,200 of my hard-earned money. As I stared at these physical reminders of my rejection, an idea began to take shape, one that would change everything far more dramatically than any of them could possibly imagine. That evening, sitting cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by wedding-related items I no longer needed, I experienced what I can only describe as an awakening. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity how I had spent my entire life bending myself to fit into the spaces my family allowed me to occupy. I had been the surrogate parent when our mother couldn't be there, the emotional support when Orabella needed guidance, the practical problem solver when things went wrong. And when I finally raised legitimate concerns about Christian, I was cast as the villain, the jealous sister, the troublemaker who couldn't let Orabella have her day. "No more," I whispered to my empty apartment. The words felt foreign, but right, like trying on a perfectly fitted dress after years of wearing hand-me-downs. I opened my laptop and pulled up the airline confirmation for my flight to the destination wedding. The ticket was non-refundable, but it could be changed for a fee. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as a wild thought took shape. What if, instead of swallowing this hurt like I had so many others, I used these resources for myself? What if for once I prioritized my own happiness? I remembered a travel documentary I'd watched years ago about Thailand. The beautiful beaches, ancient temples, and sense of peace had captivated me. But I'd filed it away as someday, a someday that never seemed to arrive because there was always someone else's needs to attend to first. With trembling fingers, I searched for flights to Bangkok. By some cosmic coincidence, or perhaps karmic reward, a seat was available on a flight that departed the very day I was supposed to travel to the wedding destination. The change fee plus fare difference would cost about the same as the gifts I had planned to buy for Orabella and Christian. "This is crazy," I said aloud, even as I entered my credit card information. But it didn't feel crazy. For the first time in recent memory, it felt absolutely right. Once the new ticket was confirmed, a sense of liberation washed over me. I wasn't going to fight to be included in an event where I was clearly unwanted. I wasn't going to plead my case to family members who had already decided I was the problem. Instead, I was going to remove myself from the equation entirely and focus on healing the parts of me that had been neglected for so long. The next morning, I requested emergency personal leave from work, something I had accumulated plenty of but rarely used. My boss, aware of how infrequently I asked for anything, approved it without question.
"You deserve a break, Brooklyn," she said. "You're always the one picking up the slack for everyone else." Her words struck a chord. How many people had seen this pattern in my life while I remained blind to it? With time off secured, I threw myself into preparing for my impromptu solo vacation. I bought new clothes, bright, flowing pieces I'd always admired but deemed not practical enough for my day-to-day life. I purchased a new swimsuit, comfortable walking shoes, and a journal with a beautiful fabric cover. Each purchase felt like a declaration. I matter. My desires matter. My healing matters. I booked a small, peaceful resort on the southern coast of Thailand, far from the touristy areas. The picture showed simple bungalows nestled among tropical gardens, a meditation pavilion overlooking the ocean, and hammocks strung between palm trees. It looked like paradise, but more importantly, it looked like the perfect place to rediscover who I was, apart from my family's expectations. The day before my departure, I packaged up the bridesmaid's dress I would never wear and shipped it to Leah with signature confirmation required. A small but satisfying act of compliance and defiance rolled into one. I left my apartment key with Miss Chen next door to water my plants and collect my mail. That evening, sitting at my kitchen table, I wrote a letter I knew I would never send. In it, I poured out 30 years of hurt, sacrifice, and disappointment. I wrote about feeling like an afterthought in my own family, about watching Orabella receive the support and encouragement that was always just beyond my reach, about recognizing the toxic patterns that had shaped our relationships and my determination to break free of them. When I finished, I read it once, folded it carefully, and burned it in my kitchen sink, watching the flames transform my pain into ash. It was therapeutic, a ritual of release. As I packed my final items, I debated whether to tell anyone about my alternate plans. Mom would worry if I disappeared completely. Dad might actually care in his distant way. And Orabella? Would Orabella even notice I was gone? In the end, I decided on minimal information. I sent a brief email to my parents, letting them know I would be traveling internationally and might not have reliable phone service for the next week. I didn't specify where or why. Let them draw their own conclusions. For work, I set up an out-of-office reply stating simply that I was on personal leave without access to email, with my colleagues' contact information for urgent matters. The final piece was my phone.
As I stared at the device that had delivered so much hurt recently, I made a decision that would prove more consequential than I could have imagined. Once I boarded the plane, I would turn it off, completely off, for at least the first 48 hours of my trip. No calls, no texts, no social media updates about the wedding preparations, no passive-aggressive family messages. Just me, focusing on myself, probably for the first time in my adult life. As I zipped my suitcase closed, a sense of peace settled over me. I had spent years trying to earn my place in a family that consistently pushed me to the margins. Now, I was choosing to step away entirely, to find center stage in my own life story. What I didn't know then was that my quiet exit would coincide with the spectacular implosion and that my silence would speak volumes in the chaos that followed. The journey to Thailand was long, nearly 22 hours of flying time plus layovers. But each mile put between me and home felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. As promised to myself, I turned my phone completely off after sending one final text to Mrs. Chen confirming I had arrived at the airport safely. By the time my plane touched down in Bangkok, it was early evening local time. The air that greeted me as I exited the airport was warm and heavy with unfamiliar scents. Jasmine flowers, street food, and tropical vegetation. A driver from the resort met me, his smile genuine as he placed a small flower garland around my neck and helped with my luggage. "First time in Thailand?" he asked as we drove through streets lined with golden temples and bustling night markets. "First time anywhere by myself," I admitted. He nodded as if this made perfect sense. Thailand is good for finding peace. Many people come here stressed and leave calm. The resort was even more beautiful than the pictures had suggested. My bungalow sat nestled among flowering trees with a small private deck facing the ocean. The decor was simple but elegant. Teak furniture, crisp white linens, and local artwork adorning the walls. A handwritten note welcomed me along with a basket of tropical fruits and a schedule of daily activities from sunrise yoga to traditional Thai cooking classes. After unpacking, I walked along the beach as the last light of day painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Couples strolled hand in hand and families played in the gentle surf, but I felt no loneliness in my solitude. Instead, there was a novel sense of possibility, of space opening up around me. I treated myself to dinner at the resort's open-air restaurant, savoring unfamiliar flavors and the luxury of eating at my own pace, without watching the clock or accommodating anyone else's preferences. When the waiter asked if I'd like to see the dessert menu, I said yes without a second thought. A small rebellion against years of denying myself simple pleasures. That night, I slept more deeply than I had in months, lulled by the sound of waves and the absence of anxiety about the wedding, my family, and Christian's suspicious behavior. For the first time in recent memory, I awoke naturally without an alarm, feeling rested and peaceful. The first full day of my unexpected vacation unfolded with a gentle rhythm. Morning yoga on the beach, breakfast of fresh fruit and local specialties, and a long swim in the crystal-clear water. In the afternoon, I joined a small group for a batik painting class, creating colorful patterns on fabric with hot wax and dyes. "You have natural talent," the instructor told me, admiring my design. "Very good balance between control and letting go." His words resonated beyond the context of fabric art. Control and letting go. That was exactly what I was learning to navigate in my life. That evening, I sat on my deck watching the sunset and found myself thinking of Orabella. By my calculation, it was now the night before her wedding back home. Was she nervous, excited? Did she have any doubts about Christian? Had anyone stepped into the role I had been meant to play, helping with last-minute details and providing emotional support? For a brief moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Then I remembered her cold text message, the family chat, the casual cruelty with which I'd been discarded. The guilt faded, replaced with a sense of resolution. I was exactly where I needed to be. The second morning of my stay began with a guided meditation session at sunrise. The instructor, a serene woman named Nim, spoke about the importance of releasing attachments that no longer served us. When we hold too tightly to how we think things should be, we suffer, she said. When we open our hands and let go, we make space for new possibilities. After breakfast, curiosity finally got the better of me. It had been nearly 48 hours since I'd turned off my phone, the longest I'd been disconnected in years. Sitting in a quiet corner of the resort's garden, I powered it on, half expecting a flood of messages. What I found exceeded even my wildest imagination. 51 missed calls, 73 text messages, 27 voicemails, multiple email notifications, social media alerts by the dozens. My first thought was that something had happened to my parents or Arabella. Heart racing, I checked the most recent messages first. From Mom, sent just 4 hours ago. Brooklyn, please call as soon as you get this. We're worried sick. We need to know you're safe. From Dad, 1 hour later. Kid, whatever you're feeling right now, we understand, but please just let us know you're okay. Things have gone to hell here. From Arabella, the most recent, Brooklyn, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please call me. Everything has fallen apart and I need my big sister. Bewildered, I scrolled back through older messages, trying to piece together what had happened. The story that emerged left me stunned. From Sarah, yesterday morning, OMG, Brooklyn, are you hearing what's happening? Christian and Leah have disappeared. With all the wedding money? Arabella is hysterical. From Mom, yesterday afternoon, the wedding's been called off. Christian left a note for Arabella. He's been having an affair with Leah. He took the money from their joint account. Please call me. From Dad, around the same time, that son of a gun cleaned out their savings account. $28,000 gone. Police have been called. Where are you? From another bridesmaid, guests are showing up and there's no wedding. Complete chaos. Someone said you tried to warn everyone about Christian. Is that true? The messages continued in this vein, growing more frantic with each passing hour. Apparently, Christian and Leah had vanished the night before the wedding, leaving behind a brief note in which Christian confessed to their affair and apologized for the inconvenience. They had taken not only the money from the joint account Arabella had foolishly opened with Christian, but also the cash gifts that had already arrived and the remaining deposits for wedding vendors. When guests began arriving for the ceremony, they found a devastated Arabella and a hastily posted sign announcing the cancellation. According to several messages, she had suffered a panic attack so severe that paramedics had been called.
The most revealing message came from Sarah. Leah told me last week that she and Christian had been planning this for months. She was laughing about it, but I thought she was joking. I should have said something. I'm so sorry, Brooklyn. As I sat there processing this information, my phone rang in my hand. It was my mother. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Brooklyn? Oh, thank God. Mom's voice was thick with tears. We've been trying to reach you for days. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm on vacation. Vacation? Where? We've been worried sick.
I decided to take a trip since I wasn't welcome at the wedding, I replied, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my voice. Oh, Brooklyn, Mom sighed. Everything's a mess here. Christian and that woman, that Leah, they ran off together. They took all of Orabella's money and the wedding deposits, everything. I know, I just read the messages. You were right about him, she admitted. We should have listened to you. Your father and I, we made a terrible mistake. The validation I had long sought was finally being offered, but it felt hollow in the wake of such chaos. Part of me wanted to say I told you so, but the words stuck in my throat as I thought of Orabella's pain. How is she? I asked instead. Not good. She's staying with us. The doctor prescribed something to help her sleep. She keeps asking for you. The irony wasn't lost on me. After being explicitly uninvited from her wedding, I was now being summoned to help pick up the pieces. Mom, I'm in Thailand, I said finally. I used the plane ticket and hotel money to come here instead. Thailand? She repeated incredulously. When are you coming home? It was the question I'd been asking myself since reading the messages. The old Brooklyn would have immediately booked the next flight back, ready to resume her role as family fixer. But the new Brooklyn, the one who was just beginning to discover herself away from everyone's expectations, wasn't so sure. My return flight is booked for next week, I said. I need this time, Mom, for me. The silence on the other end spoke volumes about her surprise at my response. Finally, she said, I understand, but please keep your phone on, just so we know you're safe. After ending the call, I sat for a long time watching the ocean, processing what had happened and my conflicted feelings about it. I had been right about Christian all along, but there was no satisfaction in that knowledge, only sadness for Orabella and anger at the way my concerns had been dismissed. I picked up my phone one more time to send a brief message to Orabella. I just heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I'm traveling right now, but I'm here for you when you're ready to talk. Take care of yourself. Love, B. Then I put my phone on silent, tucked it into my bag, and headed to the beach. I had come to Thailand to heal, and despite the chaos unfolding at home, that was exactly what I intended to do. Over the next 2 days, I maintained minimal contact with my family, checking messages once in the morning and once in the evening, but otherwise focusing on my Thailand experience. The full story of what had transpired continued to unfold through texts, calls, and social media updates. The financial damage was even worse than initially reported. Christian had not only emptied the joint account containing Orabella's savings of $45,000, but he had also somehow gained access to the separate account where the wedding deposits were held, another $22,000 that had been contributed by both sets of parents. He had maxed out credit cards in Orabella's name and, most disturbingly, had attempted to take out a personal loan using our parents' information as guarantors. The bank called to verify some details. Thank goodness, Dad explained during our brief phone conversation. Otherwise, we might not have known until it was too late. A background check that should have been done months ago revealed that Christian White had a history of financial fraud in 2 other states. His real name was Christopher William Torres, and he had served 22 months in prison 4 years earlier for similar schemes. Leah, it turned out, had been his accomplice in at least one previous case, though charges against her had been dropped due to insufficient evidence. The most damning revelation came from Megan, another bridesmaid, who finally found the courage to speak up. She was bragging about it, Megan's voice message explained. She said they'd been planning it for almost a year. Find a trusting, somewhat naive woman with family money, isolate her from skeptical influences, push for a quick engagement, then clean out the accounts just before the wedding day. They've done it twice before. The mention of skeptical influences hit home. I had been systematically removed because I had seen through their facade. What truly broke my heart was the email I received from my mother, forwarding some of Orabella's journal entries from the months leading up to the wedding. She had given Mom permission to share them with me, a gesture of vulnerability that spoke volumes. Christian says Brooklyn is too controlling. She's jealous of our happiness because she's alone. I don't want to believe that about my sister, but she is always questioning everything about him. Maybe she is envious. Christian says I need to create boundaries, that family can be toxic even when they don't mean to be. It hurts to pull away from Brooklyn, but Christian says it's necessary for our relationship to thrive. Another entry, dated just a week before I was cut from the guest list, was even more revealing. Christian and Leah think it would be better if Brooklyn wasn't at the wedding. They say her negative energy will affect our special day. I feel terrible even considering it, but Christian says sometimes we have to make hard choices for our happiness. When I expressed doubts, he reminded me how Brooklyn has always tried to mother me, to control my life. Maybe he's right. Maybe a clean break is what we need. The manipulation was textbook emotional abuse, and it made me sick to see how effectively Christian had turned Orabella against me. But amid my anger at him, I couldn't help but feel hurt that my sister had been so easily convinced to cast me aside.
On the third day of my stay, I received a direct message from Orabella, the first communication initiated by her since the infamous disinvitation text. Unlike her previous messages begging me to call, this one was different in tone. Brooklyn, I don't know if you're reading these, and I understand if you never want to speak to me again. I'm not asking for your help or advice. I just want you to know how deeply sorry I am. I let Christian convince me that your concerns came from jealousy, not love. I chose him over the sister who has always been there for me, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. You tried to warn me, and I punished you for it. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I understand now what you were trying to do. Take all the time you need in Thailand. You deserve this break and so much more. For the first time since arriving in Thailand, I felt tears rolling down my cheeks. Not tears of hurt or anger, but of relief. This message wasn't asking me to fix anything or comfort anyone. It was simply an acknowledgement of the truth and my right to prioritize my own needs. Later that afternoon, while relaxing by the pool, I struck up a conversation with Elena, a 43-year-old woman from Denver who was celebrating her divorce with a solo trip. Families can be wonderful, but they can also be toxic, she told me when I shared a simplified version of my situation. The hardest lesson I ever learned was that you can love people from a distance. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. How do you maintain that distance without cutting ties completely? I asked. Elena smiled knowingly. Boundaries, honey. Clear, consistent boundaries. I love you, but I won't let you treat me that way. I care about you, but I need to care about myself, too. It feels impossible at first, especially if you've been the family fixer like me, but eventually they either respect your boundaries or they reveal that they never truly respected you. Her words resonated deeply. For years, I had confused self-sacrifice with love, believed that putting everyone else's needs before my own was the mark of a good daughter and sister. But all it had done was establish a pattern where my feelings and concerns were considered secondary, dispensable. What if they never learned to respect the boundaries? I asked. Then you have valuable information, Elena replied simply, and you make your decisions accordingly. That evening, I returned to my bungalow and found a lengthy email from Orabella. Unlike her previous message, this one went into painful detail about the relationship with Christian, revealing a pattern of isolation and emotional manipulation I had only glimpsed from the outside. He started small, she wrote, questioning why certain friends always seemed to need my help, suggesting that you were holding me back from full independence, creating little tests of loyalty where I had to choose between him and someone else. By the time he convinced me to cut you from the wedding, I was so deep in his reality that it seemed like a reasonable decision. I'm not saying this to excuse what I did. I know it was unforgivable. I'm trying to understand how I became someone who could hurt the person who has always been there for me. The email continued with details about the aftermath of Christian's disappearance, the humiliation of explaining to guests that there would be no wedding, the shock of discovering the financial devastation,
the secondary trauma of learning about his previous victims. The worst part, she concluded, is that I still sometimes miss him. The therapist says that's normal with abusive relationships, but it makes me feel crazy and weak. How can I miss someone who systematically destroyed my life? Someone who deliberately targeted me for who I am, naive, trusting, eager to please, the same qualities that you always try to help me balance with critical thinking. It was the most honest communication we'd had in years, maybe ever. There was no request for me to come home, no expectation that I would rush to her rescue, just raw vulnerability and an implicit acknowledgement that our relationship had been fundamentally changed by what had happened. After careful consideration, I responded, "Orabella, thank you for your honesty. I'm still processing everything, and I need this time in Thailand to focus on my own healing. What happened with Christian is not your fault. You were targeted by someone skilled at manipulation and control. But the decision to cut me out of the wedding hurt deeply, especially after a lifetime of putting our family's needs before my own. I care about you and want you to heal, but I also need to prioritize myself right now. When I return, we can talk more about rebuilding our relationship if that's what we both want. Take care of yourself, Brooklyn." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was an opening, a possibility for something new to grow from the ashes of what had been destroyed. And for now, that was enough. My final days in Thailand passed in a blend of self-discovery and quiet reflection. I took a sunrise hike to the top of a nearby hill, watching the new day spread its golden light across the coastline. I learned to paddleboard, conquering my lifelong fear of being alone on the water. I sat with a Thai massage therapist who spoke little English but somehow understood exactly where my spirit felt wounded. "Family," she said, placing her hand over my heart. "Old pain here, new strength growing." On my last evening, I finally called Orabella directly. After the initial awkwardness, we had the most honest conversation of our adult lives. "I keep thinking about all the times you tried to help me," she said, her voice small but steady. "All the sacrifices you made when we were growing up. I never really saw them until now." "I made those choices willingly," I told her. "But somewhere along the way, I lost myself in the role of being your protector and the family problem solver." "I never wanted you to give up your dreams for me," she said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "I know, but our family dynamic pushed us both into roles that weren't healthy. You as the one who needed protecting, me as the one who did the protecting. We need to find a new way forward." We talked about our parents, how they had unconsciously reinforced these patterns, about my resentment and her guilt, about the possibility of a relationship built on mutual respect rather than dependency. "I don't know if I know how to be your sister without you taking care of me," she admitted. "I don't know if I know how to be your sister without taking care of you," I replied. "But I'd like to learn." When we hung up, I felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, there was still so much healing to do, but because for the first time, we had seen each other clearly as adults with both strengths and vulnerabilities. The morning of my departure, I woke before dawn and walked along the beach one last time. The woman who had arrived in Thailand a week ago, devastated by rejection and family betrayal, was not the same woman who was leaving. I had discovered parts of myself that had been buried under years of responsibility and others' expectations. I had learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but essential. Most importantly, I had found a sense of peace within myself that didn't depend on external validation. When I landed back home, I didn't immediately rush to see my family, as they might have expected. Instead, I took another day for myself. I'm packing, doing laundry, and preparing mentally for the conversations to come. The family meeting that followed was uncomfortable but necessary. Sitting in my parents' living room with Orabella perched nervously on the edge of the sofa, I outlined what I needed moving forward. I love you all, I began, but I can't continue in the role I've played all these years. I'm not the family fixer or the emergency emotional support. I'm your daughter and your sister, and I deserve to be treated with the same consideration I've always shown all of you. Mom started to protest, but Dad surprised me by placing his hand on her arm. Let her finish, Susan. We owe her that much. I outlined my boundaries clearly. No more last-minute demands for help without asking if I was available. No more dismissing my concerns or feelings. No more expecting me to sacrifice my needs for everyone else's wants. This isn't punishment, I explained, seeing the hurt on their faces. This is me learning to value myself the way I've always valued all of you. The changes didn't happen overnight. There were slips and misunderstandings, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves. But slowly, our family dynamic began to shift. Orabella and I built a new kind of sisterhood. We still supported each other, but there was more balance. She began to stand on her own feet, making decisions without seeking constant approval. I learned to offer advice only when asked, to trust her to navigate her own life. My parents, too, adjusted to the new reality. Mom occasionally lapsed into treating me as the family workhorse, but she caught herself more quickly each time. Dad made efforts to connect with me directly, not just as an extension of my role in the family. 6 months after the wedding that never was, I made another significant change. I left my steady but unfulfilling job to pursue freelance marketing consulting, something I'd dreamed of since college. The decision would have been unthinkable before Thailand, living with uncertainty, prioritizing my passion over practical considerations. But my time away had shown me that I could trust myself to navigate unknown waters. Orabella was one of my first clients, hiring me to design the marketing strategy for the small online jewelry business she started with money she'd saved from her new job. It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one. Her way of showing she valued my talents, not just my caretaking. The legal aftermath of Christian and Leah's scheme continued for months. They were eventually caught trying to run the same scam in Florida and were extradited back to face charges. Christian was sentenced to 4 years in prison, Leah to 2.5 years. Some of the money was recovered, though not all. But by then, it mattered less to our family than the healing we'd accomplished. Looking back now, I sometimes think about that cold text message that cut me from the wedding guest list. At the time, it felt like the ultimate rejection, a devastating confirmation that I didn't matter to the people who should have valued me most. What I couldn't have known then was that being removed from that guest list would set in motion events that would ultimately free me. Free me from toxic patterns, from unrealistic expectations, from a lifetime of putting myself last. There's a phrase in Thai philosophy that I learned during my stay, Jai Yen, which means cool heart. It refers to the ability to remain calm and centered regardless of external chaos. Being cut from that wedding taught me to cultivate Jai Yen, to find my center within myself, rather than seeking validation from others. Sometimes being excluded is the universe's way of redirecting you to where you truly belong. In my case, that wasn't standing beside my sister as she made a terrible mistake. It was standing on a beach, halfway around the world, finally learning to stand up for myself. A year later, Orabella invited me to be her maid of honor again, this time for a small ceremony marrying Marcus, a kind teacher she'd met in her trauma recovery group. This time, I said yes, but with clear boundaries about my involvement. This time, she listened when I shared my thoughts about her partner. Though my concerns were minimal, Marcus was genuine, patient, and clearly loved my sister for who she was. As I stood beside her at the altar, watching her marry someone who truly deserved her, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for that painful text message that had started it all. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing that could happen to you. Have you ever had to step away from a situation or relationship to gain clarity? How did you handle establishing boundaries with family members who were used to you always being available? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for others and yourself is to break unhealthy patterns, even when it's painful. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the courage to prioritize your own well-being when necessary. This is Brooklyn from Revenge Girls, reminding you that sometimes the best revenge is simply living your best life.